Before Smoke Hill, there were only dreams. Ella had been waking in her city apartment to voices in the dark, soft, rasping things that spoke her name in a cadence too close to her grandmother's to ignore, yet warped and stretched, like something mimicking human warmth. Shadows lingered longer than they should. Mirrors seemed to shimmer when she passed. And always, always, the scent of cedar and desert wind followed her, no matter how far she was from the dust and hills of her childhood. She told herself it was grief, memory, but the dreams grew sharper, more vivid. A blue door, the creak of old floorboards, and something waiting just beyond the porch, whispering her name. Ashen echoes Ella Monroe arrived in the town of Smoke Hill just after sundown, the old highway cutting through endless stretches of dust and dry grass. Her grandmother's house waited at the edge of the desert like a relic half buried in time. The deed had come in a plain envelope 2 weeks earlier, marked with nothing but her name and a wax seal she hadn't seen since childhood, a coyote paw inside a ring of black thorns. The sun dipped low behind the hills as she pulled up to the house, a squat, weather-beaten structure, roof patched in rusted tin and walls faded to a dull gray. The windows were dark. The porch sagged in the middle like a mouth missing teeth. As she stepped out of the car, the wind stirred the sagebrush and carried with it the smell of cedar smoke and something faintly metallic. Ella paused. She could hear the creak of the house settling, the distant hiss of the wind over sand, and beneath it, barely a whisper, a hum like breath against glass. The front door creaked open without resistance. Inside, the air was heavy with dust and memories. Bundles of dried herbs hung from the ceiling beams, and a dozen small talismans dangled on braided string over doorways. Bones, beads, feathers blackened with soot. The kitchen smelled like time stopped mid-meal, and every cupboard was closed, latched with twine. On the round table by the window, she found a note in her grandmother's spidery script, written on the back of a faded photograph. Child, if you're reading this, the dark has stirred again. There are stories I never told you. Some truths we don't speak aloud. Find the journal, and if the wind starts calling in voices you remember, listen only once. Then run. Beneath the note lay a journal, bound in worn leather that smelled of sage and smoke. Ella picked it up and opened the first page. The skinwalkers were more than skin. They wear names. They wear grief. They wear what we leave behind. Ella ran her fingers across the words. The page felt warmer than the air around it. That night, she dreamed of wolves with human eyes and a shadow that whispered her name in her grandmother's voice. Whispers in the arroyo morning brought a sky wide and pale as bone. Ella stood barefoot in the backyard, the desert stretching endlessly behind the house, broken only by the dry ribbon of the arroyo winding its way toward the hills. The earth here was cracked, marked with small, delicate prints, coyote, rabbit, something she didn't recognize. It had the shape of a man's foot, but far too long and missing toes. She walked the arroyo's edge, drawn by memory more than intent. Summer days came back in fragments, her grandmother humming, a rattle in her hand, the taste of sweet cactus fruit, and always, always, the warnings. Don't follow voices into the brush. Don't stare into the eyes of coyote too long. And never, ever call something by its wrong name. She found the first bundle tucked in the crook of a low mesquite tree. Feathers bound in twine, slicked with something dark and dry. A single white bead dangled from the end, clicking in the breeze. She left it untouched. That night, as the wind stirred the old floorboards and the desert sang to itself, the whisper came again. Ella. It came from the porch. She rose slowly from bed, the journal still open beside her. The cedar ash bowl smoldered in the corner. The voice came again, familiar, soft, just wrong enough. Ella, come to the door. She stepped into the hallway, heart hammering. Let me in, child. The voice was her grandmother's, thick with warmth and dust. Ella pressed her palm to the wood. It was cold. There was no shadow beneath the door. I buried you, she whispered. A pause. Then the voice replied, lower now. You buried a body. 13-teeth the thing on the stone seat wore Nina's face like a veil, stretched too tight across bone that wasn't hers. Her eyes glowed with a dim, pulsing light, not warmth. Hunger. Ella tightened her grip on the rattle, but didn't raise it yet. "You're not her," she said. The thing's smile split wider. "But I remember her. I remember you. Your first cut. Your first lie. The thing you buried behind a shed." Ella's stomach turned. The journal in her satchel grew hot, its spine shuddering like something alive. She pulled it free and held it between them. "What are you?" she demanded. The creature leaned forward. "I'm what's left when grief has no mouth to scream with, when sorrow festers into shape." It stood, and as it did, its form flickered. First her grandmother, then her father, then the boy she'd seen drown when she was a child. All of them wore her expression. "You made me," it whispered. "I made memories," Ella snapped. "You stole faces. Is there a difference?" It lunged. She struck the rattle against the stone floor, and the chamber boomed like a hollow drum. Waves of sound burst outward. Bone shattered. The creature reeled back, its illusions warping into smoke. Ella stepped forward, chanting. Each word pulled something sharp from her lungs, something old and painful. "You were us," she said, "but you don't know us." The creature shrieked, its mouth unfolding like a flower of knives. From it came a dozen voices, all hers. And one final voice, Nina's, clear, sad, and strong. "Finish it, child." The songless rattle the spell carved into the journal's last page had no pronunciation, only rhythm. Ella closed her eyes and began to shake the rattle in a steady pattern. 3 beats, pause. 2 beats, pause. 5 beats. The chamber darkened. The creature stumbled as if the air itself turned solid, trying to force it back. Its illusions collapsed. The faces, the bodies, the eyes. Only a raw shape remained now. Shifting, formless, flickering between man and beast and smoke. It screamed, not in rage, but fear. Ella's voice rose with the chant. Her feet moved around the circle instinctively, following steps she didn't remember learning. With each pass, the shape grew smaller. Cracks split the stone. Light spilled from them like molten threads. "You are not memory," she whispered. She cast the final phrase like a blade. "You are a wound that will heal." The creature burst inward, folding, breaking, burning from the inside out. It fell into itself like a dying star, vanishing with a sound like a sigh. The chamber collapsed. Stone rained down. Bones turned to ash. The air cleared with a sudden rush. And then silence. Real silence. The 13th door, Ella climbed out of the tunnel before dawn. The desert greeted her with its pale hush, the sun just beginning to stretch across the cracked earth. Her hands bled. Her legs trembled. But her heart beat steady. She drove home. Smoke Hill stood unchanged. Sleepy, forgotten. No one on the road. No one at the gas station. As if nothing had stirred. But at the house, something had changed. The blue door stood open, wide, inviting. Inside, the cedar ash bowl was full again. The altar was restored. And on the kitchen table lay a final note, written in a trembling, familiar hand. "You opened the 13th door, child. But not every door leads back. Some lead through. Some lead in." Next to the note sat the journal, closed, quiet now. The rattle lay beside it, its beads darkened. Ella sat down and stared at them for a long time. Then she reached for the phone and dialed a number she hadn't in years. When her cousin answered, half asleep, Ella's voice was calm. "There's something I need to show you." Ashes of the dogwood 2 weeks later. The house was full again. Ella's cousin Marisol came first. Then Tomas. Then 3 others, all family, distant and close. All who had heard the wind whisper their name. All with dreams they didn't talk about. They gathered around the altar, rebuilt it, repainted the faded glyphs on the walls, sealed the porch with cedar and salt. Each carried something strange. A cracked mirror, a pouch of black seeds, a copper coin etched with teeth. Ella watched them, heart full and hollow at once. They were preparing, because the skinwalkers weren't gone. Not all of them. Some still lingered in the places where sorrow festered, where names were forgotten, where the hollow still waited. Ella stood at the edge of the arroyo that evening, staring into the distance. She could feel it. The 13th door hadn't closed. It had moved. Now it lived inside her. The hollow choir night fell, but the desert did not sleep. A sound began to rise in the dark, low at first, like wind threading through broken stone. Then voices, dozens of them, singing not in melody, but in grief, as if mourning something yet to die. The others in the house stirred. Marisol came to Ella's room and tapped softly. Do you hear it? Ella nadie. They've started calling again. They stepped outside. The sky was wrong. Too many stars, and none of them where they should be. A breeze brushed the sagebrush, and the sound followed it, echoing through the arroyo like a chant spoken in reverse. They're trying to find you, Tomas said, joining them. Or maybe trying to be you. He held up the cracked mirror. Its surface rippled, showing a face, Ella's. But younger, crying, trapped in glass. They're inside the house, Marisol whispered. No, Ella said, voice sharp. They're inside us. They turned as one. The porch was empty, but the door stood open again. Inside, the shadows moved like breath. The gathering teeth, they called themselves kin without faces. They wore the skins of lost people, missing hikers, runaway teens, forgotten elders whose families had left offerings that went unreceived. One by one, they came to Smoke Hill. Not openly, never openly, but through reflections, through dreams, through the seams in memory. Ella kept the altar burning each night. The cedar smoke was no longer just tradition, it was armor. And the rattle she had used in the canyon grew heavier, more burdened with each use. The journal, however, had changed. New pages filled themselves with ink when she left it alone. Sketches of symbols she didn't know, maps of places she'd never been, and warnings written in a hand that wasn't hers or Nina's. If you write their names, they were your voice. If you give them memory, they'll birth new faces. If you answer their questions, they become real. Ella stopped reading aloud. The family grew quiet. No one left after sunset. Mirrors were covered. Names of the dead were never spoken unless burned into bark and buried. Still, one by one, they were tested. Marisol's hollow Marisol went missing at dusk. She had been walking the dry wash behind the house, gathering blue sage. Tomas found her rattle shattered at the arroyo's edge. They searched for hours, chanting, burning cedar and bones, calling out only once by her true name, knowing the risk. She returned just before dawn, barefoot, bleeding from the soles, eyes wide and wrong. At first, Ella wanted to run, but Marisol wept. I didn't answer them, she whispered. They wore you. We're all of you. But I didn't answer. Ella led her inside. Marisol wouldn't speak for 3 days. When she did, it was to whisper a name they'd never heard before. Kahiwai. Not Navajo. Not Apache. Not Spanish. Older. More primal. The journal caught fire that night. By itself, they buried its ashes beneath the dogwood tree, beneath a sigil scratched in iron. But something still whispered beneath the houseboards, beneath their dreams. Ella began to draw again, not from memory, but from instinct. She sketched 13 doorways. Only one was open, and beyond it, something watching. The nameless blood Tomas was next. He didn't vanish. He changed, slowly. At first, he stopped eating. Then he slept during the day, avoided eye contact, flinched from reflections. The final sign was when he began whispering to the rattle. Ella confronted him at sunrise. He stood in the old barn, shirtless, symbols carved into his chest with an obsidian flake. I'm keeping them out, he said. I'm making them forget me. Ella raised the rattle. You're letting them in? He laughed, not his voice. Too high, too smooth. They don't want me, cousin. They want you. You open the door. You are the echo now. She chanted as she shook the rattle, the old words scraping her throat. Tomas screamed. His skin rippled. Something beneath it tried to rise. She struck the ground with the rattle. The creature burst from his back like smoke, screeching, clawing the air. Ella whispered Tomas's true name 3 times, and it fled. He collapsed, broken but alive. That night, they tattooed words on their skin. That night, none of them dreamed. Smoke Hill falls, but the worst was still coming. Smoke Hill began to empty. Not of people, of presence. The gas station still operated. The cafe still served chili and cornbread. But the eyes of the townspeople grew dull. Their speech slowed. They forgot things mid-sentence. Names, roads, years. They were being hollowed out. The kin had found another way in, not through fear, but apathy. Marisol found the first sign on the church door, a symbol scratched in salt beneath the cross. Ella found the second on her skin, a bruise in the shape of a spiral that never faded. One by one, the family began to lose their voices and dreams. One by one, they woke with blood in their ears. They knew then, the door wasn't just an Ella anymore. It was open, and something had stepped through. The mob beneath Smoke Hill, it began with the well behind the house. The one no one had touched since Nina sealed it with iron and ash. One morning, the seal was gone. No wind, no storm, just gone, as if it had never been there. Ella stood at the edge, staring down into the shaft. The rope and bucket were missing. The stones around it were cracked with a strange, symmetrical pattern, like teeth. And at the bottom, movement, not water, not shadow, breathing. Marisol and the others formed a circle around the well. They chanted for hours, salt circles and cedar, smoke rising into the sky. But nothing changed. The breathing continued, soft and slow, patient. Then they heard the knocking, from beneath the ground. A single knock, then 2, then 13, spaced over hours. Ella remembered the 13th door from her drawings, the one that never opened. It had found a way through anyway. The 13th comes, they called it Konai, the echo that eats its own name. It was older than skinwalkers, older than blood. Nina had written about it once, in a letter never sent. Marisol found it tucked into the folds of an old coat, wrapped around bones. Konai does not wear skin. It wears silence. When it arrives, it unnames everything. You won't remember being afraid, only empty. It didn't attack. It waited. In the days that followed, Ella noticed things going missing. Not objects, concepts. Birdsong stopped. Dreams ceased. Mirrors no longer reflected their faces. The rattle made no sound when shaken. Tomas forgot his mother's name. Marisol forgot her own. Ella wrote hers down on her skin each night before bed. But even ink began to fade. The broken chant, they tried to perform the banishment. The ritual was old, kept only in memory. Nina had said it once to Ella as a child while braiding her hair. If the hollow comes, she whispered, sing the names of the dead. Remind the air of what was lost. So they gathered by the well, lit the fires, drew the symbols, and sang. Ella led, her voice hoarse, trembling. She named them all. Her grandmother, her uncle, the boy from the mission, the girls who vanished in the hills. But each name made the fire dimmer. Each word felt stolen. By the 7th name, the air froze. By the 10th, Ella couldn't remember the next one. She looked around. Tomas was gone. No scream, no sound, just gone. The fire went out. The well rumbled. Konai was rising. The shape that wasn't the next day, Ella woke in the middle of the desert. No memory of how she got there. No tracks behind her. No sun overhead. Just endless sand and stone. And a woman walking toward her, slow, barefoot, hair braided with feathers. Nina, but not. The woman smiled, eyes black and starless. You finally opened it, she said. Ella estuvo. Her rattle was gone. Her hands were burned. Where am I? Between, the woman said. Between forgetting and being forgotten. Ella looked down. The sand was covered in names. Thousands. Carved over each other in layers. Some ancient, some fresh. Nina tried to stop it, the woman said. But the 13th always comes. It just waits for the right echo. And I was it, Ella whispered. The woman nodded. But you don't have to be the door. You could be the lock. Ella turned to face the horizon. The sky was splitting open. Not with light, but with silence so deep it hurt. She walked toward it. The lock in the Bone Smoke Hill was gone when she returned. No people, no sound, just buildings full of shadows and things wearing faces that didn't blink. The altar still stood, burned down to coals. Marisol's rattle lay atop it, snapped in two. Ella walked through the town barefoot. The silence moved around her like mist. Her name was gone from her skin. The ink had vanished, but something pulsed behind her eyes. A word, not a name, not quite. Closure. She walked to the well. The ground shook. Konai's breath curled up like steam. Ella climbed to the edge, opened her arms, and whispered her name once more. Not to summon, but to seal. The ground cracked. The well swallowed her. The 13th locked. They say Smoke Hill is a ghost town now. No one remembers its name on maps. No signs lead to it. No GPS pings. But some nights, in the desert wind, people hear rattling. Not a snake. Not bones. Something else. And if they follow it, they find a blue door swinging gently. No house. Just the door. And behind it, a whisper. Not a warning. A name. Ella. The aftermath years passed. The land where Smoke Hill once stood became known by no name. Locals avoided it, not out of fear, but because they simply forgot it existed. Roads veered subtly away from it. Maps marked the space with a pale blur. GPS devices glitched and rerouted travelers before they could cross the invisible threshold. But stories lingered, not told aloud, but half remembered in dreams. A girl with burnt hands, a song without sound, a door that opened into silence. Some claimed a fire had swept through the region. Others blamed a chemical spill. A few old-timers, mostly drifters and tribal elders, muttered about something older, a hunger that learned to speak. The land stayed quiet, but it was not still. The one who stayed, Marisol, remained. After Ella fell into the well, she awoke miles away, face down in red dust. Her voice was gone for 3 weeks. When it returned, it did so in a whisper that sounded like two voices tangled together. She never left the region, took up a trailer in the hills, set out traps not for animals, but for echoes, walked the perimeter each morning with a bundle of cedar and salt, placed stones in spirals, and never spoke above a murmur. They said she went mad. They were wrong. She remembered. Each year, on the hottest night of summer, she returned to where the house had stood. The foundation remained, charred and half buried in sand. The blue door lay flat, sun-bleached and cracked. She would sit by it, place her rattle, now whole again, beside a small offering, sage, a feather, and a name carved into a stone. Ella, she would whisper. Sometimes the wind answered, sometimes not, but she always stayed until morning. The new listener in another city, far away, a young woman dreamed. She'd never heard of Smoke Hill, had never set foot in the desert, but her dreams were dry and red, filled with thorn brush and distant drums. Each morning, she woke with a word on her tongue that disappeared before she could say it aloud. She began to draw circles, teeth, doors. When her grandmother died, she found a journal beneath her floorboards, not leather-bound like Ella's, but something newer, the pages blank, until she opened it. A single line appeared in faded ink. If the wind carries a voice, listen only once, then run. She didn't. She listened twice, and the rattle began to hum. Ash and echoes the desert remembers, not with words, but with absences. People who go missing, names that no longer return search results, places that once had meaning and now spark no recognition at all. The kin without faces still wander, seeking names to wear. But the 13th, it waits, not in a well, not in a town, but in memory itself. It feeds on the hollow spaces left by grief. It grows when we forget why we mourn or who. And sometimes, when the wind is just right and you've said the name of the dead one too many times aloud, you may hear a rattle. Once, maybe twice. Listen closely, because if the third sound comes, it will already be too late, and something will be looking out through your eyes. The end.